Good afternoon. This is Elaine Groman for Earth Wisdom Circles on Empower Radio. And today I have a very special guest with me, Fred Brown, who is working globally to help others understand this pandemic, this global pandemic that we have been so inundated with. There's creates a lot of fear, but the thing that is so beautiful and important about what Fred does is he understands with clear science what is happening and how to help us from an economic, a personal, and a health strategy. So welcome to the show, Fred.
Thanks so much for having me, Elaine. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So give us a little bit of a background about yourself, keeping in mind that this is a global audience. So, what is your position here in Michigan, and how are you working with individuals and, different organizations to understand this pandemic?
Well, I'm trained as a medicinal biochemist, and so in my career to date, I've just helped discover and or launch 27 major drugs, 16 major diagnostics, and 6 vaccines. And one of the ways I use to measure what kind of success rate is how many people's lives you save each year as a result of the work that you've done. And right now I save about 5.6 million lives before COVID hit. Now that I'm working in COVID, I actually work with all over the world. I'm a dual citizen, Swiss and United States, so I do a lot of work with the EU and the UN. That's where WHO is headquartered and so on. Worked with them for many years, about 40 years now in the field, and so I'm working with the countries of Israel, Singapore, Saudi Arabia, the EU at the Commission level. In the United States, I work with 17 different states, we're doing quite a bit of work with the USAID, UNAID, and the Philippines, Singapore, Hong Kong, a few other areas. So I'm starting to see, what the different alternative options we've got to try to control COVID look like, and hopefully we'll learn more faster as a result of some of the work I'm doing. But overall, it's about 1.2 billion people who are I'm trying to impact right now with all the work that I'm doing all over the world.
So you have educated at both Tufts and Harvard, and I had the opportunity about a month ago, I believe it was, to be on a Zoom call that was 3.5 hours long.
Oh, you
with about no, it was good. With I think there was 145 participants that you were helping people understand strategically what needs to be understood about the variants of COVID and the uniqueness of the chemistry of it, how it affects the body. So it's not, yes, sometimes people are concerned, that you've been involved with pharmaceuticals, maybe do you have a vested interest in this? But I think that there's so much more that we have to understand as you understand the science of what this virus is doing.
Oh, yeah, I should say that starting in February last year, I became very concerned about the virus. And so I'm a consultant, obviously, to the industry, to healthcare systems all over the world. But starting in February of last year, I decided not to do any more consulting. Everything I do is completely pro bono. And so I have no conflicts of interest. It kind of puts me in a unique position to know the industry, know the government response, but I have absolutely no conflicts of interest.
Well, I think that's so unique, and I thank you for that integrity, because that is, everyone is kind of leery because people are frightened. It's interesting, Fred, because I've been doing a lot of research about past pandemics, about the Spanish flu and what happened, when people didn't understand. Literally, if you didn't wear a mask at that time, you would be arrested. There was no question, because they didn't have the science that we have now. And we certainly didn't have the global travel like we have now, import, export, humans physically being able to move all across the world. So the exponential rate of infection is a big challenge. So tell us what you have learned and what you're doing right now, what we need to know, if you would, please.
Well, there's a whole bunch we don't know about the virus, so I should be clear. We're still discovering things every day about the virus, and certain things about this virus are unique. The fact that it spreads so much asymptomatically, it spreads so much, through the air, and it spreads through super spreader events. Those are kind of rare, frankly, in the viral spread and the other diseases that we tend to watch. It has a moderate level of kill rate, but we're not exactly sure what it is. And those kill rate determinations are really important. It's called infection fatality rate. That we look at the IFR. That's very important to decide what policy you're going to have. If you think you've got an IFR of 0.5% versus 1%, that's a huge variation in policy you've got to do and protections that you've got to make. So there's a whole bunch of things we don't know. What we do know about the virus, though, is that it's really a multivascular disease. It hits your lungs, but it really affects a lot of your body. And so one of the things that we're watching quite carefully right now is the long haul effects. And what we're finding is that people who have been asymptomatic suddenly come down with a lot of long haul effects. So if you suddenly feel fatigued, if you suddenly feel that you can't breathe effectively, you may, if you suddenly have neurologic symptoms, these may be you're predisposed to them to begin with, and the COVID virus asymptomatically has pushed you over the edge to allow these symptoms to come forth. And we're seeing that in about a third of the cases. Actually, it's really remarkable, and these people are affected probably for their lifetime. They've got permanent scarring in their lungs, they've got permanent damage to their heart, myocardium, and so that's one thing that I'm quite concerned about, is that what we don't know about the long haul effects are going to affect us far beyond this. And so, if you can avoid getting this virus, it's very important to try to do that. And there are a few things we know about trying to avoid getting the virus as well, which we can go to as well. But that's some of the things I'm watching right now. The big question for epidemiologists right now is, are we going to have a fourth wave? Right? We've had our first wave. We were kind of surprise attacked. We didn't have our guard up, frankly.
Yes.
Then the next stage is we open up a little bit too early. Some states opened up a little bit faster. I consulted to a lot of these states. I tried to do what I could. It didn't matter to me whether they red states or blue states. Some states did open up a lot more rapidly than others. Some countries opened up a lot more rapidly than others, and they felt the effects. They had a second wave. The third wave was a holiday wave, which we just went through, and now we're coming down 70%, thank goodness, from where we were at our peak. The big question is it going to start to turn around toward the end of spring with these new variants that are coming out? And that's what we're watching very closely right now.
Yes. It's interesting because as I said earlier, I was doing some research about different viruses of different pandemics, plagues, etc., that have gone across the world. And have they done any research that you're aware of to see if anyone has any genetic anomalies that might predispose them to be more naturally protected?
That is a great question. We are looking for that all the time. If we're trying to look at what we call the host genotype and phenotype to see whether or not there's anything in there that gives people predisposition toward either getting more ill or less ill. And there's, believe it or not, right now, Elaine, 1/3 of the scientists on the planet are working in some way on COVID. So chances are that if you have a question, it's being studied somewhere by somehow. And one of the things we did, I worked with ACIP and the National Academy of Medicine to try to understand what the sequence should be for vaccinating. And so you'd think that people who are predisposed toward getting the virus and being more susceptible will be the ones you want to work with first. We found that men are generally about 30% more likely than women to have a bad event, but women sadly are more likely to a fatal event. Women are, however, more likely to have a long haul effect. So they may survive it, but they're going to have longer term conditions. So there's some offset there. So men and women, there's a genetic difference in the response we have. Men tend to over-respond to their immune systems. Women tend to not do so much. The ethnic and racial profiles, we have not seen anything genetic in that space. We are looking very carefully. Unfortunately, the societal shifts and the cultural shifts in the ethnic minority groups, the Black groups, the Hispanic groups mean that they are probably age adjusted about 3.9 times more likely to die of COVID than the white population.
Now, is that because of pre-existing conditions like perhaps diabetes, heart disease, blood pressure issues, that kind of thing? Comorbidity?
It has exactly right. It has nothing to do with the genetics, which is what you were asking about. It has everything to do, though, with the way sadly, the way the health system, the access to health is dispersed in the United States. We don't see any differences on a country by country basis when you look at primarily Black population, primarily white populations by country. So there's really at a population and an individual level, we haven't seen that. The most important factor, there are two big factors: your age. So over 65, you're at much higher risk of dying. And your comorbidities. If you've got 3 or more comorbidities, and those include things like congestive heart failure, diabetes, you are 7 times more likely to die of COVID than the other groups. And you start to add all those things together, and they are correlated, of course. You start to get people who are 20, 30, 40 times more likely to die of COVID should they catch it. And those are the people we're trying to vaccinate first because they're much more susceptible.
No, it's interesting that you were saying that women are more likely to have to be long haulers, and I'm just curious, as a woman myself, a mother and grandmother, women traditionally are the caregivers. So, the women, there's a greater propensity of women being nurses that are the ones that are, taking care of people that are severely ill, just at home, whether they have the cold or the flu or whatever. They're the caregivers. So does that have any correlation, do you think? In my mind, it would make sense that if the woman is the one taking the care, physical care, that she's going to be more exposed.
Yeah, that's a great point. We did also look at prevalence by professional, by profession, and not only is it something that in society women are more prone to do, taking care of children, taking care of the elderly, taking care of the sick in their homes, but as professions, they're more likely to become nurses. It turns out that the most susceptible and the most at-risk group of all professional are the nurses in this group. And so we're trying to vaccinate the nurses first. Obviously, the doctors are a much smaller percentage of the population. They're also at high risk. But nurses who are on the front line, those are the people who are at the highest levels of risk professionally to get the COVID.
So, Fred, thank you for that. And can you tell me, please, what is the challenge that we're having now with the vaccinations that you're seeing? Obviously, there's huge challenges, but how are they being looked at from your point of view? How are they, were they promising too much, then they weren't able to deliver? So then people's hopes were inflated, so that causes some disgruntled individuals. How do we do this in such a way that people have an understanding of what is actually happening systematically, so that, we can do this in a timely way as best as possible for those that choose to be vaccinated?
Yeah, so right now there's a significant supply shortage at the vaccine level, and I think that shortage is going to be overcome probably by mid-April. So by mid-April to June, people who want to get the vaccine will likely be able to get the vaccine, given that Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca and Novavax come on stream. If they don't come on stream and they're not regulatory approved, which is not expected, they're expected to be approved. Johnson & Johnson in March, AstraZeneca probably end of April, Novavax probably beginning of June. If those companies come on stream, then you'll see quite a bit of, you'll see actually, you'll move from a situation of supply shortage to a situation of supply overabundance. And that's because there are a lot of people who are actually, we think we're going to be able to vaccinate about 195,000 people pretty easily. People will want to actually
195,000?
Million, excuse me.
Okay.
195 million people in the United States pretty easily. There'll be demand for that. They'll be actively seeking out the vaccine. The next, and as you know, we have about 330 million total. Take out the children, because the children won't be able to be vaccinated, sadly, until at least after August. We won't have the trial data yet. Those will be under 12s. 12 to 18s. The under 12s probably won't be able to be vaccinated until 2021, and the under 2s probably not till 2022. Give you a sense of how we're going to roll this out, how long it takes to really demonstrate efficacy, because the immune system of children is quite different from the immune system of adults. You have to redo some of the trial work and do some bridging studies to show that it's safe and effective, especially at the dosing level. So when we see the rollout, we think that the last 100 million or so people are going to be quite difficult to vaccinate. People are going to be thinking about things. They want to watch and wait and see. There's several different levels of reason for that. The first category of people that we see in the distribution issue are going to be people who are skeptical, laggards. They kind of want to wait and see and make sure that what happened to Joe is okay, and they'll all tweak it if Joe takes it later and everything works. Then there's a group of people who are culturally resistant because, and this is primarily the Black community, especially because they've got legitimate reasons to be unhappy with the fact with the history,
because of experimentation that has happened to them as a culture.
They have been mistreated, frankly. And so there's a lot to get over there. That's about 15% of the population. We think we can get about half of those people to vaccinate between now and the end of the year. We think we can get about 95% of the people who are skeptical laggards, because it is an effective vaccine and safe. And then we've got people who are what I call the angry disbelievers, and those people really think that we've overreacted to COVID. They're upset about the impact that it's had on their personal and professional lives, and they really don't want to they don't want to engage with the health system. They sure don't want to give COVID the pleasure of knowing that it's sort of gotten them beat somehow in some way, and so they're angry, and so there's that actually is about 20% of the population, and about 10% of the people of the population is actually anti-vax. So I think when you think about how many vaccines we have to distribute. Right now, we are in a situation of not enough supply of the vaccine itself. By about mid-April to early June, we'll find that we've turned the corner and we'll have actually more supply than people really want. And at that point, it's all about promotion and appropriate social media interactions and engaging the people. And that's going to be a long, hard slog. The challenge, Elaine, is that when you look at the characteristics of the vaccine, this is one that to establish herd immunity, which we would want to achieve, is going to be extremely difficult. And the reason it's extremely difficult is several reasons. First, it's about the virus itself. The virus spreads asymptomatically. And so when you're with herd immunity, if you have symptoms and you're going to spread, you can then kind of protect the people who have not been vaccinated. In this case, we can't do that. Second big thing is it transmits through the air and very easily. It has a high rate of transmission and it's everywhere. Once you get herd immunity, we're saying that there's a part of the population that doesn't have to be vaccinated or doesn't have to be immune that can be protected by those. If we have enough people who are immune, they'll be protected, and they won't have to get vaccinated. They won't have to be immune. They won't have to get the disease. We have to get to that level, though, of having enough people who have said, I'm going to take the vaccine, that it protects those who don't want to take the vaccine or don't want to, who aren't immune in some way. And there's some people who have medical conditions where you don't want to expose them to the vaccine. There are other people who really, for religious reasons, don't want to have the vaccine. So that's what we're trying to achieve. That number, we think, and I think from the evidence I've seen from around the world, is probably about 82%. We need to get about 82% of the population immune to COVID in order to protect the 18% or so who don't want to take the vaccine for whatever reason. And if you heard all those numbers in the past, I don't think we're going to get there. I don't think we're going to get herd immunity to protect the people who don't want to have the vaccine. And so in some cases, I'm hoping that we can incent them. In other cases, we may, for some professions like nurses or frontline people, we may have to have mandates, which would be unfortunate. For children at school, we may have to have some mandates. I don't know where that's going to go from a policy standpoint, but I don't think we're going to win the hearts and minds of enough people to take the vaccine to become herd immune. And the other big thing we're worried about is whether the vaccine is effective enough against the variants, which are much more powerful, sadly, than the original vaccine that we concocted to fight the original COVID.
If I'm not mistaken, I think that I read or heard that I think it's the AstraZeneca one, and I don't want to misspeak, that was expected to be able to affect this variant is not as effective as they were hoping. Am I correct in that?
All the vaccines aren't as effective as we were hoping for some of these variants. What we assume with the vaccine, what we've done is we've created just a little piece of normally what you want to do is you want to kind of stimulate your immune system to remember an attack. And usually we have to actually get infected. The immune system then creates antibodies, and then the next time you're attacked, you're ready to fight it off. So what we do with the vaccine is we've taken a little piece of it, the spike protein, and we have we've just injected that part of the protein. So it isn't going to that part of the virus. So it isn't going to actually infect you. It's going to give you a little piece that your immune system can remember. It says, aha, that's an attack. And then be ready with two things. The first is what they call circulating antibodies. Well, first you have an innate immune response. Then you've got, and what this vaccine does is it stimulates two areas. The first area is the antibodies that are circulating in your blood. And so what those antibodies do is before it can even attack the cells, the virus can attack the cells. It gloms on to the virus that's trying to attack, and prevents it from even attaching itself. The next area, though, is even more important, and that is the cellular immunity. Now, that means is once the virus enters the cell, the immune system can look at that cell and say, aha, that one's been infected, I'm going to kill it. And those are the killer T cells you hear about, and the vaccine does both of those things. It gives you more circulating antibodies so you can attack the thing before it even gets into your cell and attach to your ACE2 inhibitor, ACE2 cell, ACE2, the ACE2 receptor of which is all over your organs. Many of you, it's all about the angiotensin. That's a big system. So almost all of your organs have those sites to bind to, which means that it's not just your lungs that get infected, it's your kidneys, it's your heart, it can be your brain. There's a lot of additional areas that this virus can attack, and so that's what the idea is here. And the problem with the variants is we thought, that spike protein that actually binds to the cell has got to be what we call conserved. It's got to be the thing that is the unique part of the virus that every one of the viruses is going to have, and it can't change too much because it's got to bind carefully to your receptor in your cell, right? So you don't think it's going to change that much. Unfortunately, that's not the case. What we found is that we found that the spike protein that we've created we've created the vaccines for actually is quite what they call plastic, and the result of that is that the mutations around the spike protein are actually 4 times higher than the rest of the virus. And unfortunately, if you look at what we've created, it's this little piece of protein and literally every vaccine uses that same little piece of protein. And so when these spike proteins escape AstraZeneca uses that same protein as Johnson & Johnson, the same protein as with just a very small number of modifications, literally 2 proline groups and a tiny amount of modification for stabilization. Same as AstraZeneca, same as Moderna, same as Pfizer, same as all the Chinese vaccines that are coming out. All these things use the exact same protein. And so when a variant escapes one vaccine, generally it's going to escape the others. And what we found is that the effectiveness in South Africa, effectiveness in Brazil, is about 6 times less than against the original Wuhan virus that we originally created the spike protein. Right? So you had the original Wuhan spike protein, all these modifications, literally 23 modifications in the Brazilian variant, means that fundamentally it's almost a new virus, and even if you've been infected before. And your body's supposed to recognize it. What we found in Manaus, Brazil, is that we thought we were 72% protected with all the other people who've gotten sick. So many of the population had gotten sick. We thought 72% of the population has gotten sick with the Wuhan virus. And this new variant, it didn't matter whether you'd been sick or not. Reinfection rates were 90%. And that's huge, right? Because you suddenly have given the virus, the variant, a whole new population to reinfect, reproduce, mutate them again, and that's what's so scary.
You know what I think is an important part of the conversation that maybe often is kind of omitted or overlooked is we have to make sure that people's natural immunities are as good as possible. So obviously with people I actually happen to work with a free food pantry. So if we don't have healthy people, if they're not getting the food that they need, then their bodies are going to be so much more susceptible to not just COVID, but a whole host of other problems that will overwhelm the healthcare industry. So we have to really look broadly, how do we keep people as healthy as possible? Because our thought processes affect our chemical system, which affects our autoimmune system. So if we help to mitigate the incredible amount of stress, food disparity, healthcare disparity, all of these things have to be a part of looking at, I would imagine, I would see, in my not as educated as yourself, but I think that we have to understand that there's so many things that affect our immune system.
Well, you work in energy, so in energy metabolism lane, so you know a lot about the area, and you're absolutely right. It's very important to keep your immune system strong, and there are a couple of big things to do. The first thing is, as you said, nutrition, eat right, be healthy. Second big thing is exercise, and the exercise really stimulates the immune system, gets your body moving appropriately. Third big thing is if you can vaccinate for other things like the flu, it actually kind of readjusts your immune system and helps you fight off other pathogens, believe it or not. It's sort of an interesting effect that we see, so that can kind of reset your immune system if you're older. If you're younger, it probably isn't quite as a big as an effect. And there are a few other big things. Sleep. Plenty of sleep is really critical. People don't think about sleep. I don't get enough sleep. And that really leaves you much more susceptible to being unable to fight off the virus, to fight off any pathogen if you don't get that. There are some, of course, good vitamins, minerals that you can also start to do. I think there are two things I would say. You can actually, if you're planning to get the vaccine, you can actually improve your immunogenicity of having the vaccine. There's a range that you have of immune response. And if you are in better health, if you are well nourished, if you have gotten enough sleep, if you have gotten, probably if you were able to walk for half an hour the day before to get your heart rate up a little bit, that actually puts you in a much better position to have a better immune response than not. Also, you don't want to take, inflammation reducers like ibuprofen or acetaminophen 2 days before or up to 7 days after taking a vaccine, because that actually reduces your immune response. Sure, don't want to have it, be on steroid treatments and then take it, have a response, and you don't want to be on you don't want to be immunosuppressed completely when you have when you take the vaccine. So there's some things there. Finally, drink enough water.
Yes.
Keeping your mucosal membranes moist really does fight off the virus a lot more effectively than not.
That speaking about the mucous membranes, is there any information or is there any dissemination of information if someone knows that they have COVID? Is there anything that people can do to try to minimize the, obviously, since it's coming in through your nose and mouth, probably other ways that we might not even know. Is there any ways to help to diminish its potency, making it an inhospitable environment, maybe being more alkaline, more acidic, something of that nature? Is there any research in that regard? If you're
already infected, are there things you can do to reduce the shedding? Well, the best thing to do is to wear the mask, right? It turns out that if you are sick and you don't wear a mask and you're with someone who does wear a mask, that person, the attack rate on that person, if you're there for more than 15 minutes at less than 6 feet distance in an enclosed environment, about 70%. So you've got a high attack rate if you don't wear a mask for people who you care about, and so try to wear the mask. If you are not sick and you wear a mask, and you're dealing with someone who is sick and wear a mask, you're just not that protected. It's about 20% protection levels. If the person who's sick wears the mask and you don't, you're about 70% protected. If both of you are wearing a mask, you are about 98% effective. And if both of you are wearing an N95 mask, both of you are almost completely, it's about 0.01%, 99.9% protected if you wear a well-fitting N95 mask. Technology makes a huge difference. When the CDC just came out with masking and indicated that right now, masks that look like this, you're about 42%. You stop about 42% of the particulates that are coming out that are going to be infective. Now, a lot of them drop to the ground, and that's why the attack rates aren't quite are better than you think. But but if you wear a surgical mask with some that keeps it tight, then you drop up to 60-70%. If you're an N95 mask, you're up at 98% blockage of that. And what's going to happen, Elaine, is that these new variants are much more they're much more infective and transmittable. So in England, what happened was they actually said, well, we're going to put, they watched the curve go up, and they said, time to put down our lockdown, or we're going to, and these are severe lockdowns, right? They're not like ours, which are sort of suggestions. These are, if you come out after 8 o'clock at night, you'll be arrested. You cannot go to bars. Everything's shut down. More than 6 people in your home is disallowed. You can't. You literally are very, very locked down, and it didn't stop the spread. In fact, it just kept right on going. And then that's how they started to realize, oh my gosh, you've got a variant here that actually spreads a lot more. So starting in March, this variant doubles. When we look at it as epidemiologists, we look at doubling rates. This variant doubles every 7 to 10 days. So right now, for example, in Florida, it's about 7% of the total population of viruses is this new variant. So you double, you start to realize that within very few weeks, this will become the dominant variant. And so what the CDC recommended was, if you have like a mask like this is the typical mask you've got. They recommend, and they did the studies on this, you fold it in half like this, right? And then you tie up both ear loops, right? So you tie these up, and like I'm showing you here, and you push this down as close as you can to the mask, right? So now you've got that, and now you tuck this back in, and you put it in like this. You put it over your ear, right? You have to wash your hands before you do this, by the way. Now look at the difference between one side and the other.
Yes.
You see, this is 60. This side. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm reversed. So this side is 62% protected. This side is only 44% protected because all the stuff is coming out.
That's a significant drop.
Huge improvement in protection. Just try to do that if you can.
So they need to retune this design, obviously. But also back to what I think. Pardon me?
Ties are better. They're a little bit, especially for small children.
Okay. So the other thing that I was thinking, like for someone here in Michigan, there's a lot of seasonal allergies. So I, in the past, have used like a nasal wash.
Yes.
That has helped, a neti pot or something, a saline solution.
Absolutely.
That actually flushes out whatever is the contaminant that's causing in terms of a reaction to it. If you're allergic, that's the word I was looking for. Then I'm wondering if that would be just helpful. You never know; it's not going to hurt you to use a neti pot or something like that to wash out your nasal cavity. And then also like the typical Listerine or something like that that is going to kill bacteria. We know that it kills bad breath. It probably kills other viruses or bacteria. To me, I would think that would be a benefit. I understand that they're doing that kind of research in Germany and other European countries to see what can you do to stop its replication within the body. That's what I'm asking about.
Yeah, and it turns out that some of the more effective things we're coming up with vaccines are actually through the mucosal membrane. So there are 2 vaccines that are coming out that'll come out probably by the end of the year, maybe a little bit beyond, that actually allow you to do one of two things. One is to give you a temporary boost just with what they call monoclonal antibodies to boost your immune system, last for a couple days if you know you're going into a very infectious environment to kind of be preventative. Second is really to do they have right now 2 flu vaccines that are like this, the FluMist and others. And it tends to be a better way of vaccinating. So that's one big area that we're looking at through the mucosal membrane. You're right, Medipod and continued. You don't want these mucosal membranes to dry out. If you dry out those mucosal membranes, you're much more susceptible to having the vaccine stay there for a longer period of time. Your immune system is not stimulated, so it is considerably better. I forgot the exact numbers where people are looking at some of this, and then of course some of the washes that you're talking about also do protect you slightly, but it's not going to be, sadly, this vaccine, this virus is very transmittable, and it's not going to be as good as the mask.
Well, yeah, and I think that we have to do as many things as possible to help to kind of get it from all fronts.
That's right. It's a Swiss cheese approach, right? You might get through the mask, but it won't get through the distancing, or it might get through the distancing, but if you stay outside, it'll dissipate more. Those kinds of things, all lining up together to actually defend, are very important. And I'm worried about the vaccine because I think people are going to have to continue to wear the mask after the vaccine. They'll have to continue to be 6 feet distancing even after the vaccine, because we don't know whether the vaccine stops transmission. We know that it reduces symptoms, but if it continues to cause transmission, then you still have that big gene pool. You still have all these variants coming out, and so even after you get the vaccine, it'll be important for you to wear the mask for some time until we understand this better.
So one of the things that you're currently working on, Fred, and again, my guest is Fred Brown. Fred, what is the best way for people to reach out to you when they hear this, if they have any questions, or are you working with new entities, new organizations that might be wanting to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a little website, fredbrown.com, and you're welcome to take a look at that. We're probably going to change it to askfred.org because we're not a commercial entity, as people pointed out. That's probably the best way to reach out and ask some questions. There are also a lot of answers there. I put all the work that I've done on the website. Because I have no conflicts of interest, I ask everyone if it's okay to talk about what I've done for them. And everyone's been very open about that and said, sure, so far I've got a couple of resistances from industries who don't want me to talk about things, some areas of competitiveness. But overall, everything I talk about is on the website. And I encourage people to go to the website and take it down and reuse it. Because the only way we're going to beat this virus is with a network effect, right? And so if everyone uses, if you become a spreader of good information, and people come in and use what you want.
Right, right. So are you finding any opposition to people that are saying, how about if we use maybe zinc and I can't remember the chloroquine or something like that? All of those things, not as, I think that people are either all or nothing in their mind. Instead of, we have to, as someone who's worked with people, trying to help people in medicine understand, we have to change our language. I think sometimes we don't want to go to battle.
That's right.
Because you don't want to battle cancer, because who's going to lose? The person with cancer. You have to help the body help itself. We have this incredible biology that we know really very little about it. And it is designed to help itself. So we have to learn, how do we help our body help itself? And I think that this atmosphere that is very contentious creates stressors, creates anxieties, creates unnecessary battles that stress the body even more. And the difficulty of being separate from your loved ones, being in environments that you're not accustomed to having to work at home, your children at home, all of these extra stressors. We have to think about, in my mind, ways to help support people in multiple ways, not just say, here, get this vaccine, it's going to be the end all. We know it's not. It's how do we come together as a human species and help one another instead of fighting one another?
Yeah, one of the things I work on a global basis. One of the things I'm really worried about is that, there'll be countries that are completely vaccinated and quite removed from the challenges of COVID on a day-to-day basis. And then there'll be a whole host of countries, by 95 more countries, that won't have access, that will, continue to have the spread, continue to have the problems. And we have to kind of work on not just on an individual level to kind of bring everybody together, but on a whole global level. And I'm trying to do that as much as I can, trying to give the best practices, trying to get people as much support as you can, at a community level and then on a global level. And these communities who are unable to get the vaccine, or who have a lot of resistance within the community for one reason or the other, either they've had a bad interaction with the health system or whatever. There are going to be pockets of people who are still very susceptible, and so those people we need to do as much as we can for, as well as people who are more protected. And I'm trying to work on that.
So, Fred, can you tell us a little bit about those countries and what those practices are that are having a better efficacy rate?
Well, it's interesting. I do quite a bit of work with India, quite a bit of work with some of the African countries, initially they had a much, and with Singapore, for example, they had a couple things going for them. Number one, they dealt with these bad diseases for a long time, right? They dealt with, believe it or not, we have these kind of epidemic issues every 2 years. I worked on Zika, I worked on Ebola, I worked on HIV, so we have these blowups, but they haven't really reached the United States, so we're not as familiar with the health requirements and kind of daily protections that they are. And so the first thing that, for example, Taiwan did, and Taiwan, for example, has only had a couple hundred deaths and 20 million people. The reason I think it's 485 deaths total to 20 million people. Extrapolating, that would mean that we only had literally a few thousand people dying instead of 500,000. What they did was they really did masking extremely well. They were used to using masks. It was part of their culture. They put it on. And on day 2, after they decided that COVID was in their community, they arranged so that every person got an N95 mask every day for 50 cents. Every person, every day. So, that kind of thing really makes a big difference. They were ready for it. They
accessibility of what you need.
Accessibility makes a difference. Korea did it a little bit differently. They are a testing culture. So they went ahead, and you're in Korea and you want to get a test, you've got one in 5 minutes. So you can go anywhere you want to get a test, and whether or not the person you were exposed or not, and they track it to some extent. They have some good tracking, but most of it is everybody knows their health status, right? So if you're sick, if you're asymptomatic, feeling great but still spreading it. So they did extremely well there. India has a very good system of tracking whether people are susceptible or not susceptible. That quite automated. So they've got a health card that'll tell you what their status is at all times, and help you understand whether you're transmittable, not transmittable, vaccinated, not vaccinated, healthy, unhealthy, what part of the country you're in. So you start to be able to see the patterns that you need in order to correct at a population level. At an individual level, it's all about just being aware of your health status if you can. And that's what's so tricky about this virus is you can feel great and be infecting everybody around. And that is why it's so hard. We did simulations, or we do simulations every couple of years. We've got big programs with Europe, big programs in the United States. I mean, look at the characteristics of a biological attack like COVID. And the things that made those attacks more dangerous were exactly what you're seeing with COVID, right? The transmission through the air, non-touch with aerosols, large asymptomatic populations, large differences in the response rate. Young people don't have, very, very few young people have a bad outcome with this versus the elderly, which have a large, and so these communities get together and suddenly they have a lot of trouble. No knowledge of how to knock it down in any way like we have with the flu. All those things have come together, and then we've got the transmission through the air, allowing it to move from country to country very rapidly through urban areas and air travel, as you pointed out initially. Those things really make it tough to beat this virus, and you put it in, and then you throw in the fact that it transmits at above a, probably we think we just still don't know, at around a 2.5 rate of transmission. If one person gets infected, means that 2.5 more people will get infected by those people. The super spreader piece may be a benefit, may not be a benefit. We don't know what causes the super spreader. So those are the simulations that we have, and COVID fits right into the one that is one of the hardest to stop. And so here we are. Yeah.
So Fred, are you finding, in terms of being a scientist and a data gatherer, are people being open with sharing their data across countries? Is there, as obviously as this all began, and the suspicion was that it may or may not have come from China, that there was the deniability, then there was, is that a big problem, the open communication, transparency?
Huge. Yeah. And probably one of the worst, believe it or not, sadly, is the United States. We do not have good communications of what are going on. I was on I helped Johns Hopkins with some of their work early on, putting up the doomsday clock, and we actually reported what number of people were unrecovered. I went back to I was doing some analysis last night. They decided not to post that because the United States doesn't communicate, for example, whether you've recovered or not in many states. So we don't know how many people are long hauled and how many people aren't long hauled very effectively. We don't track in 27 states. We don't track your sex or race, so we can't really tell what's going on with whether there's a good distribution of vaccines or not. Our vaccine system, our healthcare system is so fragmented that we can't tell where the vaccines are at any given point, how many and so we're going on weekly cycles. So anyone who's in logistics knows that when you do weekly cycles instead of real-time cycles, you get a lot of extra inventory in the, plugging up the system. You get a lot of ineffective and inefficient movement of goods, and we have not, and that's a big problem. We just don't.
Why
have
do you
the
think that is? What is the barrier there? Why are we not willing to talk to one another about these things? Or why isn't there a universal way of tracking all of this? Obviously, because it is a global thing. It should be a global information, easily shared.
Yeah, no. Well, there are some countries that think that this is a matter of national security. They don't want to admit weakness, right? And we are one of those countries. We don't want to admit necessarily what the weakness is. We can't get reports of how of whether or not what the rates of our military vaccination levels are, or military illness is, and that's because we don't want to tell everybody what's going on with if your entire military force is sick. You don't want to announce it to the world. So that's kind of legitimate. What isn't legitimate is when the systems have gotten so old and aren't flexible enough and are on paper and full of errors that then move to a CDC level where the CDC's been underfunded for so many years that it can't really respond effectively. It doesn't know the data, so it has reports coming out that says open up all the schools, don't open up all the schools. We don't know whether the masks work. You do know where they do know the. I mean, that's just craziness.
Right.
And so we have to conduct these carefully controlled trials to demonstrate what is kind of common sense, frankly, because we don't have the immediate population data that should be so available to us, and it just isn't. And it's very, very frustrating as someone who's trying to affect change. And you talk to these poor people, at a city level, at a municipality level, at a jurisdictional level, at a state level. There are all these different levels. Each of them have different metrics. Each of them have different measurements. Each of them have different systems. So you talk to a Walgreens, they're actually supporting 70 different integration systems right now, trying to figure out where the vaccines are, where they have to go. I mean, that's just insane. And then they're having to support all these different informatics systems to understand where the vaccine is, who's been distributed, who at what point, whether the vaccine's gone bad or not because it's gotten missed the cold chain. It's just.
It's a huge IT problem.
We've underinvested for a long time, and it's all kind of hitting us at once right now.
Yeah, it's come back to bite us. I think we have to recognize, that we have to, when we're at survival of a species, we cannot wait and say, well, now we're extinct. We have to recognize that as the stewards of the earth, humans are the only ones that have, to our knowledge, the gift of choice. And we have to be wise. We have to be full of integrity. We have to recognize this is not about money, because money is literally just a dot on a screen. It's a man-made concept that has, when you die, you can't take it with you.
Yeah. There's something very terminal about death, isn't there? Yeah, and you look at what you look at the plan that Biden has put out. It's a $1.9 trillion plan. Of that, only about 100 million. So we're talking about 5% is being dedicated to actually fighting COVID, increasing PPE, increasing testing, increasing vaccination. Everything else is about preserving sort of the money. Making sure that the financial money flows, making sure that individual house systems flow, make sure that the state and local governments have money to keep things just going. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to kill off COVID quickly, which we failed to do so far, and preserve enough of the economy so that we can move and spring back to the old ways. And the longer we let COVID go, the less likely it is we're going to spring back. And that's really getting this.
What I found, Fred, and I'm relatively new to being in the nonprofit arena, working with our organization, Cares of Farmington Hills, where we're feeding about 500 families a month.
Oh, that's great.
And, but we have to understand that what we have found is that it's the private sector, it's private companies that have come forward. They've retooled their manufacturing to make sure that people had masks or whatever they needed. And it's so heartening to see that these individuals that are coming forward that have maybe a produce company, they're coming and saying, what can we do for you?
Yeah, and the answer is a lot locally.
Absolutely. That's right. So that's one of the things that I think that we have to band together. working from a medical point of view, a scientific point of view, a practical point of view. How do we care for one another in a whole different way?
Yeah, there's a lot of disparity, unfortunately, and I've been looking at this. We're having what they call a K-shaped recovery, and I don't know if the letter K, right? But you had the COVID occur, and there's a group of us, the higher level income that did, actually really wasn't affected very much,
Yes.
and there's about half of us who've been incredibly badly affected. We're talking about no health care, no access to health care, no insurance. Worrying about the roof over their head, worrying about having significant food insecurity. These are tens of millions of people in the United States. 50 million people are worried about where their next meal is going to come from.
Yes.
That is, and COVID just accelerated that whole piece, because unfortunately these people, through no fault of their own, they're people, when you withdraw from the economy, what happens is, especially the services economy, because people are scared to interact. It's not so much, actually, believe it or not, it's not so much about the lockdown and the mandates. It's much more about what people feel comfortable doing and the risk levels. And people just started to say, I don't really want to go to a restaurant. I know they're open. Some of them are open, but I don't really want to go to work out in public, because if they're not feeling safe. And so they withdrew. The result of that is that that part of the service sector just dropped. And it's down 45 to 80%. If you're in travel, 80%. If you're in hospitality, 45, 50, 60% gone. I mean, there's not even any interaction. And so those people really have to protect it as we move through this, and hopefully kill off COVID so that we can come back to some normalcy.
Yes. As you mentioned, Fred, there's so many individuals who have to, they're living in close quarters. They don't have adequate housing. They don't have adequate heating, cooling, water. These are fundamental human problems that we have to look at, and we have to look at with honesty and integrity, and we need to recognize we have made a lot of mistakes as human beings.
What's the name of your food group?
It is called CARES of Farmington Hills.
CARES of Farmington Hills.
It's an acronym for Community Action Resources Empowerment Services.
Love it.
And we have, we have to look at big organizations like religious organizations that are
Absolutely.
very, very, very wealthy.
And they're engaged with the community too, and people trust that the religious.
Well,
groups.
they have to be more engaged. I mean, we don't need vaults of money sitting somewhere. We need people's food. We need people being clothed, housed,
this is the time, yeah.
taken care of. This is what it means to really be in service to humanity. What does that mean?
And I think that the government really has to get a lot more involved in providing the masks and providing the testing. The amount that we're doing is way low. And as someone who actually works with other countries and looks at what they've put into place versus what we've put into place, the level of investment is just literally, we're off by orders of magnitude. It's not even like, well, we should produce a few more masks. So you go to 3M, you go to Honeywell and say, can you increase mask production? Yes, we go to 3 shifts a day. We'll increase by 20%. We don't have enough masks at an order of about 17 times. We need about 17 times more masks. Mm-hmm. When we look at the testing, we really should be testing everybody every couple of days. That's what you need to do to control this thing, because there's so much asymptomatic spread. Right now, the amount budgeted is we can test one person in the United States once with a PCR test for the remainder of the year with the budget we've got right now. That's ridiculous. And it's never going to, and we need to not just test for whether you have the disease, but how protected you are as a result of having of being infected before or having a vaccine. And we also have to look. That's what they call serology testing, and we have to look at this genetics to understand what variant infected you. Those things we don't have. We're testing at the variant level. 0.23% of samples. 0.23%. I mean, meanwhile, Australia's testing 58% of samples. So we have to do better, and we're just not. And that's the government. I mean, the government has to step up. It's got to do more.
Well, I also think that private sector can come forward and say, if the government's not going to do it, we can do it. Just like we found in feeding, from going from 100 families or 125 families a month to, at one point during COVID, 1,200 families a month we were feeding in our little organization.
Absolutely.
And it wasn't because of government's helping us. It was
Nope,
because of people helping us.
It's everybody.
So I thank you for, being very willing to be forthright and honest about what are the challenges, not just telling everybody go get a vaccine.
Yeah.
What are the challenges? We have to look at how do we learn to speak to each other, and how do we build the trust instead of being so wary of one another? Is what is their ulterior motive? If it's just financial, then we have a problem.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and hopefully we'll get control of the virus. What's funny, Elaine, is that when we had the first round, we said in 3 months we'll have this under control. It'll go away. Remember that was President Trump, and he said, 3 months it should be gone. We should be, and a lot of people said, yep, 3 months, that's about right. We'll get under control of this. Then the next one hit right when we opened up a little bit too soon. We said about 3 months. Come the fall, we'll be better. And then the next one hit, right? And now we're at the next one, and we're saying it's about 3 months away. We'll have these special vaccines. Well, all these silver bullets haven't been helpful yet. Yeah. It's going to take a lot more than just waiting for that single thing. It all has to come together. We have to do it all, and it's going to be hard. But unless we do it, collectively, and try to put as much out there as possible, like a real war effort, we're going to keep having this problem, and it's really ingrained now, and we're going to have trouble getting rid of it at this point. It would have been easier a year ago. Now it's going to be really hard.
Well, like you had said earlier, there's the work that has been done, and actually I did some research. I've watched documentaries about, how did they help to mitigate AIDS? How did they help to mitigate Ebola? How did they help to mitigate the Spanish flu? It took consistency, dedication, honesty. And that was in times where there was less known entities working together. And, it took a long time, thinking about the time. My father was born in 1919, in the middle of the Spanish flu. And these were people that had nothing but their wits. They had no vaccines. They had none of those things.
My great aunt died. My great aunt died in 1918 with the Spanish flu.
Yeah. So we have to really just be willing to work with one another in a whole different way, because what does our humanity mean to us?
Yeah, and what's interesting is if we can do it for this one, we can probably do it better for the next one, right? So these investments that we're making right now aren't just a one-time shot. This is going to be something that really can be impactful, for the next generation, because we're going to have to fight this again and again. We're coming closer together as a people around the world. The infection rates are going to go be higher, and we're getting closer to the wild animals that keep the viruses going, because we're killing off their habitats there, sadly. We're just getting to be more people around, so we have a lot more exposure to these things. And I think if we do this well and we get the infrastructure in place well, we'll be in a much better place in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think, Fred, thank you for all that you do. And again, my guest is Fred Brown. You can go to his website, www.fredbrown.com. And, take a look at the interesting things that he's doing. He's not just only pushing vaccines. So many people are afraid of that, but, you have to be willing to look at what is real. And I think we have to get together with people of all sectors, those who, are working at the community level, feeding people, making sure there's clean water, making sure people are housed, making sure that they have the medical care that they need. Working collaboratively on so many ways is going to make a big difference. It'll help to stop the fear and the anger when we work together face to face. So I want to thank you for your time. I know how busy of a man you are. I really want to thank you for what you're doing.
Anytime. I'd be happy to come back when you have more issues. I'll be happy to come back.
Well, okay. I know where to get you.
That's right.
Okay, Fred, thank you so much. This is Elaine Groman on Earth Wisdom Circles on Empower Radio. I want to thank you for all that you do. Every one of us can make sure that we are cognizant of dignity and respect for a human life, our own, those that we love and care for, because the greatest gift that we have mutually is life itself. Thank you.